Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rangers Review. I'm Blair Malloy. I'm joined today by Josh Barry, and some eagle-eyed viewers amongst you may have noticed that we are in a different location this morning. We have our very own studio. It's been a long time coming. It's been a labour of love, but we have eventually got there, Josh, and it's very exciting to be here.
Yes, labour of love for you more than me.
Yeah, okay.
I've just been sending you emails saying, when are we going to have it? But yeah, good to have a different space and be bringing people more in-person shows. We've got loads of new ideas that we're going to scale out throughout the season. We just need Rangers to play some good football. So we'll see how that goes.
Easier said than done, I think.
Indeed.
And of course, it's not just us here this Saturday morning. We are joined by Johnny McFarlane from afar. Johnny, how are you doing? And well, we've got you here. What are your thoughts on that result the other night against Graz?
Oh, God. I feel a rant is about to hit you like a tidal wave, lads. How much time have you got? We'll try and get this in under 2 minutes. I thought it was absolutely dreadful in the first half in particular. Defensively, just a nightmare. As everyone's saying, what are they doing at both those goals? John Souttar massively out of position for the first, and the second is just literally one of the worst goals I think anyone has seen from a Scottish team in the European theatre. So, disastrous first half. Rangers improved in the second, but let's face it, they couldn't have been worse. They could not have not improved. It was so bad. So I'm limited to the amount of praise that I'm going to give them on that basis. I didn't think Graz were a good side. So it's not as if Rangers pluckily fought their way back in against a team that had better players, etc., etc. This is a team I think that comfortably would have been dispatched by previous managers, Philip Clement for sure, certainly Giovanni van Bronckhorst. And listen, Michael Beale got a lot of stick while he was at Rangers, and rightly so. And I think even Michael Beale himself would hold his hands up to having made mistakes. But Michael Beale left the club with a 72% win record. Currently, this manager, Russell Martin, has a 31% win record. I mean, it's so far from being even close to the mean that it's actually bonkers. It's baffling that he's still at the club. And I understand they're trying to give him time, but this is just not working, and it won't work. And no manager can ever recover the kind of start that he's had. So I really hope, for the sake of the club and the sake of the season, that Rangers act at some point on their manager, because he's a dead duck, and he's a lame duck. So it must be time to act. And if it's not now, then I fear that the connection that drives Rangers forward, which is that between the fans and the players, that between the fans and the club, is going to be severed in a way that's going to lead to the worst thing of all, which is apathy. And then everyone is in trouble at that point. We're already seeing Rangers losing significant amounts of money in terms of tickets sold, in terms of corporate tickets sold. This will only get worse if Russell Martin remains in charge. It's diabolical, and it has to end. And everyone is saying the same thing. And when everyone's saying the same thing, it's because they're right. And there's not a clever strategy behind the scenes that we're not aware of. It's not going to work. So time for action, I'm afraid.
Well, Johnny, we don't want to dwell too much on the game the other night, but just to follow up on your point there, I must ask you a quick question. I know you've said that it's time for the Rangers board to act. Do you think they will act? And if they don't, what does that say about this current setup behind the scenes at Ibrox at the minute?
Well, I don't think they'll act, because they'll see it as European football, which is of less importance right now than getting the domestic show back on the road. So I think there's almost double weight to the games in Scotland. I think there's a sense that things are perhaps slightly turning in terms of behind the scenes at the club. I think maybe there's a growing understanding of the level of disconnect, but I don't think that's anywhere near the stage where Russell Martin would be dismissed off the back of a 2-1 defeat in Europe. I don't think that's going to happen. All eyes now go on to the fixture at the weekend, and that's the one I think that will determine Martin's future much more.
Yes, we'll come on to talk about that Falkirk game in a little bit, given this is the Saturday morning preview show of the weekend, as it were. But in this studio, this is a space to discuss slightly bigger issues around Rangers, and maybe have a bit more of contextual chat about what is going on at the club, and maybe a little bit of behind the scenes. And I think that has been one of the major contentious issues that has caused a lot of friction so far this year, Joshua, is between the way the board are trying to do things and the fans just not seeing it on the park quickly enough.
Yeah, I have a quote for you, and I think we mentioned it in the morning briefing yesterday. But what I think is maybe helpful to discuss a little bit today is how have we got here? Because when Johnny says that 31 win %, you're like, this isn't like 5 games, it's 16 games. How can that be? And it is a new world. There's a new world from, as you say, Michael Beale, who a couple difficult games, and it was contextual to that summer. They also left Rangers, I think, when they're 7 points behind, and it just feels like, as I say, a totally new world in terms of how the manager is being judged at the moment. Before, things were arguably too emotional, but you need to have the emotion within a football club. You need to harness it well, but you can't not acknowledge it totally. And what I think this has been a case of is, to some extent, an overly ambitious appointment on a number of fronts, because it was an unpopular appointment, but also because it was quite a radical thing they're trying to do with the style of play. And the fallout that you're seeing is the result of maybe overstretching too far too soon. So I've got a quote to try and demonstrate this. It's from Miguel Delaney, and he's speaking about Ruben Amorim at Man United and how you form an identity, a playing identity, a club DNA. This is what a lot of sources at Rangers started to talk a bit about at the start of the year. Let's not forget there was this external football, what was it called, review into the football departments commissioned at the start of the year. But there's parallels, I think, with Amorim, and that United have decided they're going to do something pretty radical, and quite a lot of it hinges on this one guy who isn't getting results. So therefore, what do? Have they built it backwards, in essence, instead of trying to build up from the start? So I'll read the quote and I'll try and articulate what I mean by that. Best practice in the modern game is for a football hierarchy to first decide what their ideology is going to be, with that ideally informed by the history and culture of the club. I think that's really important. Every single decision should flow from that. From recruitment to coaches, it automatically means clubs don't find themselves in this situation where so much seems to be weighted on one man. United, despite so much talk of a new era, have done the same thing. They've hired a coach with an extremely defined approach first, meaning so much is already anchored to that. Worse, it's a specific approach that most other coaches don't adhere anything like to anything like it. That's maybe a little bit less specific because Rangers aren't playing like a 3-4-3, but again, we can come back to that. It would have been better if Amorim came into a squad that at least had previously tactically adaptable players to a broader ideal. An even greater frustration pervades at United since the Portuguese has the resilience and charisma for the job. So the reason I bring that quote up, Blair, is 2 reasons. One, I don't think that the style of play that Rangers have tried to implement under Martin, I think that is a clash with the history and the culture of the club. I think Ibrox, and you saw this last Thursday night, it was almost like a haunting place, because Ibrox is somewhere where like all these best European nights have not really been... The crowd can survive when Rangers are off the ball as long as they attack quickly. But when it's ponderous in possession, that is a culture clash. And another quote that I think is helpful that we've used before is Graham Souness speaking in 1986. He says, "I expect to be criticised for the way we play, but it's my style of play and I'm not about to change it." He then was referring to bringing in a slower build-up play from Liverpool at a very different era. The point being, like, this is there's a parallel with this in history, right? Souness has the aura, the gravitas, the buy-in to basically say to the fans, get on with it. Russell Martin does not, because of how he started, because of how unpopular the appointment was. The point I'm trying to make is, I think you look at this in hindsight and you think, Rangers have tried to do too much too soon. They've tried to recruit a whole new squad for a whole new style of play in June and July. They've then went in really hard and dogmatic with it. And as we discussed in the briefing, have kind of adapted that since the 6-0 Bruges game and been a little bit more, less dogmatic. We see Martin throwing 2 strikers on up front. But again, you feel that needed to come at the start to just get results first by whatever means necessary, and then build up your style of play. And And all this, again, feels like a missed opportunity, because you look at Celtic, you look at the opportunity there is for Rangers to actually strike while the iron is hot this season. But I think they've been caught in going for something really ambitious, but the club, the infrastructure, the squad, the suitability to the culture, when all these, the club's culture, what the fans expect, when all these things are against you, it is an absolute mountain to climb. And if you maybe hypothetically built up towards it, the famous example is City with Pep, who got his, I know this is an extreme example, but like clubs then copy that, right? You get the people in behind the scenes to build the squad for him so that the transition period is easier. Instead, Rangers have went in like complete cold turkey, and the fallout of that is what's materialised, I think, over the last couple of months.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point that you look at the amount of money, the amount of time, and the amount of backing that Russell Martin has been given so far. And I think a lot of fans just don't really understand that. I think, Johnny, if I bring you in on this here, it amazes me, and I think it amazes a lot of fans, and what I don't think they can get their head around, and why they're becoming so angry towards the way things are going on, is that they don't understand why Rangers seem to be going to bat for a man who, let's face it, was not a particularly successful manager before he came to Rangers. He had a less than 40% win ratio, and yet all the Rangers fans are being told, no, this is the man you need to hitch your wagon to. And it just seems madness at times to go, why are we throwing the baby out of the bathwater for a guy who's proven that nothing, he's not really won anything yet?
Yeah, well, I think the problem is when you've got an executive that have gone and made a big decision on the manager, and let's be honest, we know from what we've heard behind the scenes that they really, really did go through a tortuously detailed process. The information that we've had is that Russell Martin had 7 or 8 interviews to get the job. He really was put through the ringer along with other candidates until they felt like they had the right guy. So when they go to that level of detail, when they go to that level of work to get someone, I understand why they're reluctant to say, you know what, we called this wrong. This wasn't the right decision. But then when you start saying that one's wrong, then you have to start to potentially unpick quite a lot. So when you combine that with the fact that Rangers have, without a doubt, and this is, listen, I think we've probably been as guilty of this as anyone at times when it looked like managers in the past, like Giovanni van Bronckhorst in particular, had run out of time. We suggested that Rangers should make the move and call time on that particular manager. But I don't think there's any doubt that people look back on that and say, look, there was a succession of managers that just weren't given enough time. And there was a propensity towards the hair trigger. There was a propensity to say, like, this isn't working, we need to move on to someone else who can get this working. So that's all factoring in. The stuff that's factoring in from the past. And that's why I think it's interesting when Russell Martin talks about not being influenced by what's going on before he arrived. But it influences everything. The past influences the future at all times. So these two factors together, I think, lead us to where we're at with the boards. And nobody really is close enough, I don't think, to the decision makers. If you think about Kavanagh, Marathi, what are they going to do? We don't know. But I can't imagine that the status quo can continue into the foreseeable, because it's just simply going to cost Rangers too much money. It's going to cost Rangers too much in terms of the connections that drive the revenue levers that bring the club's success. If you're talking about strips, I mean, goodness knows how the sort of third strip is selling and things like that. These are things that are driven by a wave of support or feel-good factor. And that just isn't there, and you can see that. And that's just other small elements. You've got to think about the bigger picture. Again, the match tickets, the corporate tickets, these all drive that revenue number at the end of the year. And that revenue number at the end of the year is so important, since it was linked via PSR to the budgets that the clubs have to spend. So we all thought that the 49ers coming in alongside Kavanagh would trigger a revolution in that area. And the only way that is possible, the only way that they're going to be able to make that function, is by maintaining a connection. And under Russell Martin, that is impossible. So I do agree with you. I do agree with you, Blair, that it's kind of it's hard to wrap your head around. I don't know why they're not making the decision at this point, because I think it's gone past the point of patience and giving them a real chance to get it together. I just see the disconnect there as unbreachable, as breached to the point that it's not going to be able to be put back together again.
That disconnect between the fans and the club, Josh, is such a vital thing when trying to contextualise this whole thing. And you spoke there a little bit about Graham Souness, bringing in a quote from him, and he was a man who got it, for want of a better phrase. He is a man who was intrinsically linked with the club and is still heralded today. And I think you look back at most successful Rangers managers, there was, in at least most of their spell, if not all of their spell, a really strong link between the manager and the fans. Now, I've long held the belief that Rangers don't necessarily need a coach. They don't just need a head coach. They need a statesman figure at the helm. They need for want of a better word, they need a president. They need someone that can steer the ship, because it is a massive ship, and they need someone that has broad shoulders, that can take on all of the politics, all that comes with managing Rangers, because that is almost as important as what kind of free kicks you take, what kind of throw-ins you take, whether you play 3 at the back or 4 at the back or 5 at the back, whatever. I think maybe moving to that direction of a Steven Gerrard style. We've seen how successful that was in the end up, and why fans took to him so much, because Rangers fans want this figurehead at the head of their club, and it seems like the board want to go in a completely different direction to that.
Yeah, it's trust, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I totally agree with you in relation to a figurehead, and the politics point is probably the most important to pick up there, because the politics haven't been played well, and again it matters so much because we spoke in the morning briefing on Friday about the fact that managers are like they're salesmen, right? They need to convince the players to buy in. They need to convince the supporters to buy in. And if you don't do that, then and the results have been as they are. You're looking at it and you're saying, well, what is there to hold on to apart from a hope that it will get better?
Yeah.
And that's not a sufficiently strong enough argument to just not do what has been done before.
And it's blind hope right now. There's nothing to hold on to. There's very, very little you can look at from this season and go, oh, I think that is a green shoot, because it just doesn't exist.
Like the second half last night or Thursday night, I don't think that second half is like a performance where you really build on it, because I don't think Rangers are going to play a 4-4-2 with 2 strikers. And, you know, it's kind of similarly to how they win the game at Livingston. Okay, it shows that I think the squad haven't checked out. But I don't think it's building over time on these ideas. The argument Martin and those kind of close to him all along have said, like, wait until a couple months in, time on the training pitch. But that's not what we're seeing now. We're kind of seeing them, as I say, occupied as, I think, quite weird tactical middle ground, where they're not quite doing what they were doing before. And there's a lot of breakdowns all over the pitch. What you needed was a strong July and August to get through it. That's when you needed to be pragmatic and be less dogmatic. That's when you needed to shut up shop against Motherwell away from home, instead of ending up with a midfield of Lyle Cameron, Conor Barron and Nadim Barami.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those lessons have been learned too late, because I think the lessons have not been learned from previous regime. This summer was not a clean slate. It was in one sense, right? And part of the apathy is because there's this incredible juxtaposition between the excitement of May and the takeover and the realization that at the moment it actually feels worse than this time last year. Almost even when Rangers had been out of their stadium, when they didn't have a CEO and a chairman for a point, when Philippe Clement, the manager, was almost like a head of football just by default, because he was the last.
He was the only man there.
Yeah, he was the last senior man in the building. And there's a feeling that things aren't working because they have not been. And just finally on that political point, whether it be little things like the Kieran Dowell situation, the Nico Raskin situation, even daft things like the suit, all these small elements play into the big picture. And the quote that I go back to quite a lot is Russell Martin said after St Mirren away, I think, when the Rangers draw 1-1, I think, away from home. He says, normally we're only 2 or 3 games into the season by this point. that's not everyone knew you were going to be 8 must-win games into the season by this point.
Yeah.
And because the idea hasn't got off the ground, then you reach this point in October. And that's why I keep going back to this phrase of, if you're doing an ambitious idea, you need to build up towards it. I think it's been done backwards, and that's why we're in this position.
Josh said it's a daft thing like the suit, but I have to jump in and say, look, I don't think it is a daft thing. I think it's kind of at the core of the problem. And it cuts to Russell Martin's character. He comes into a club with over 150 years of history that is a special club, that is an institution in Scotland. This is not a Southampton or a Swansea or an MK Dons with respect to those clubs. This is a big dog. This is a European heavyweight. This is a club that has a record of winning things constantly. And you have to come to a club like that, and you have to be part of that club. You don't impose yourself on that club. That club imposes itself on you. And if you're very, very good in time, you become part of the fabric and part of the history from doing things your own way. I look at people like Steven Gerrard and Graham Souness, genuine world-class footballers with huge reputations across the continent. Steven Gerrard speaks for himself, single-handedly basically dragged Liverpool back from 3-0 down in a Champions League final. Graham Souness won 3 European Cups with Liverpool. You know, these are guys who were at the very, very apex of the game, and they conformed to the club's standards of wearing a suit on a match day. And Russell Martin came in and looked at that history and said, nah, that's not for me. I sweat, so I can't wear a suit. And to me, that just speaks to a certain lack of understanding. And I have it on good authority. He was warned prior to the start of the season that you should be wearing a suit because the fans won't like it if you don't. Really, it's an important thing. And he didn't listen, and he's disregarded that aspects of the club's history that goes back 100 years. And I think that tells us quite a lot about what he thinks he's in, what movie he thinks he's in. And look, listen, I don't think it's important if he wears a suit or not to the team winning games, but I think it's important to this crucial thing that we're discussing about leadership, about imposing yourself on a football club, about bringing the fans with you, bringing everyone with you. And to me, it just spoke volumes that he wasn't prepared to do that. He wasn't prepared to bend and yield like someone like Gerrard and Souness did. And I think that's really important because ultimately, Steven Gerrard talked about this issue and he said, I'd rather wear a tracksuit on the touchline. I'm not comfortable in the suit, but I understand it's the history and it's the culture of this club. Look for the quote, it's there, so I'm going to do it. So while I agree with Josh, it's not a big football thing, I think it cuts to the very heart of the issue when it comes to if Russell Martin's a good fit as a coach or a manager for this club.
Yeah, so I agree with what you're saying there, Johnny, and maybe daft's the wrong descriptor, but like daft is like, you're right, it shouldn't matter. If Russell Martin came in and won out all his games, no one would be speaking about it. However, what I think Johnny's right to pick up on, and what I think translates to that line that I'm using from that quote, ideally informed by the history and culture of the club. If you go against that and you be countercultural, it's going to be uncomfortable. If you go against that and you're countercultural across all these different mediums we are discussing, and you're not good, it's going to be terrible, which is why the atmosphere has been what it has been. And on Steven Gerrard, there was a bit of a theory, and I remember hearing it in retrospect from some people, that he maybe would have considered not wearing a suit after he won the league, maybe if he won something else, because as Johnny says, I don't think that was, and he did speak about it, I don't think that was his choice, but it was a compromise. And all these little things add up. All these little things contribute to the atmosphere. I remember asking Russell Martin after the 3-0 home game against Bruges, 3-1 home game, when Rangers went 3-0 down against Bruges inside like 20 minutes. And I asked him about, like, was there anything tactical? And he said, no, it's about this and it's about that. The reason for me it was tactical is tactics is like, it's not just us moving little counters on the tactics board. How does what the players are doing on the pitch, how is that impacted by a crowd like Ibrox, which can be the 12th man or can make the ground want to swallow you whole. That again comes into what type of players have they recruited, and then not signing a new spine to the squad. Have you got the characters there, which again is a tactical point, to carry out a difficult, stressful instruction? So all these small things matter. All these small things contribute to a bigger picture. And yeah, I go back to that point. If you're being countercultural, you need to be really, really good. At the moment, it just feels like there's one thing after another chain reaction of events that have gone wrong, that have been mistimed, or just kind of out of step with what, you know, someone like me or you or anyone watching, any fan who's deeply ingrained in the culture of the club would understand. Maybe that seems like a daft thing, but when you're in here, when you're in the heat of it, these things, it can be magnified and work against it and discount it at your peril, basically.
I think it's a really interesting point that you make, that you can't wind it back. They went in too heavy to begin with and tried to really change people's minds on what Rangers should look like very early.
Yeah.
And you don't get that buy-in without having results to begin with. Like you said, Steven Gerrard couldn't turn up not wearing a suit before he'd actually won anything, because all of a sudden it puts you on the back foot. And to the layman, to the outsider here, it looks like such an open goal. It looks like such an easy thing you can do to get the fans on side. All these missteps that we've talked about, the way the Nico Raskin situation was held, it seemed like a very easy fix. Just be a bit more transparent. When you're bringing in players, be a bit more transparent about why they've came to the club. Now, maybe that emanates from a position where the board don't feel like the fans need to be informed, where they don't feel like they want to share that information with the fans. They think that what they're doing behind closed doors is for them to deal with, and the fans are just a necessary addition to put money into the club. I don't know. But we've seen, and you've probably all seen those videos on social media of fans confronting Kevin Thelwell, confronting Patrick Stewart. It just shows, and I think actually Kevin Thelwell dealt with that situation quite well, but it shows a disconnect between those at the top and those in the stands.
Yeah, and again, I go back to all, like, if you're winning, you can survive anything. There's a great quote. I think it was Bayer Leverkusen sporting director Simon Rolfs, I think his name is, and he's talking about like a project and building something at a club. And obviously, the theory to appointing Martin is Rangers don't have a discernible style. So we're going to appoint this guy who might not have won stuff, but he can coach a discernible style. And to be fair, that is a pattern that you see it right around world football, with younger coaches being appointed, and more for maybe what they can do than what they've won. That's a whole other conversation. So there is a theory behind it, but then when it doesn't work, it looks really exposed because you're not getting results. And it feels to me, it's a phrase that is not my own, unfortunately, because it's a good one. It's like a post-results reality where everything can be explained away. Everything is part of a journey. Everything is part. But when you're someone who's going out to watch that game in Austria on Thursday, when you're someone who, again, this season is not a clean slate. Rangers fans, when they go to a game, they're not thinking about, oh yeah, all these this new club structure is working for our betterment and things are going to be better in the end. They're thinking, I've not watched a league win in my seat since, for what, nearly, you're getting towards 15 years?
Yeah.
Because COVID, obviously, people weren't in. Yeah. So again, there's like, you've got to consider that.
With all that being said, Johnny, there is a small matter of a game this weekend as Rangers take on Falkirk tomorrow. What are you expecting on and both off the park come Sunday afternoon?
Well, I imagine there's going to be even more unrest off the park. There'll be protests, there'll be banners, it'll be all the stuff that we've seen already, probably with stilts, because ultimately I think there's a sense of building anxiety, and only Russell Martin and the team can stem that, can stop it from continuing to overtake everything and everyone in its path. So they've got to go into that game against Falkirk. It's highly winnable. Falkirk are sitting in 11th place in the league. Yes, it's on their turf. Yes, it's on their backyard, and it's going to be more difficult. If it was at Ibrox, you'd feel more confident. But this is the kind of game that Rangers simply have to win. Now, Falkirk are not a team that's going to go long and it's going to go physical. It's going to try and disrupt you that way. John McGlynn is noted for playing the game the way that he likes to play the game, which is getting it down on the deck, passing and moving, and trying to create patterns and be attacking and get forward in a more probably modern way than say, for example, some of the other teams in the league. So I think in many ways it's a decent fixture for Rangers to have. But at the moment, you can't be cocky or arrogant about any game in this domestic setup, because Rangers have looked so ill-equipped for the challenges that they would face in Scotland. We're talking about a team, after all, that in 6 games has scored 5 goals and conceded 6. It's got a goal difference of -1 and 7 points from 6 games. So this is bottom 6 levels of performance so far. So I don't think you can be confident about going up against a team that are likely to be in the bottom 6. Based on current form, they're much of a muchness with Rangers. They've got 5 points. What I would say is they've got a propensity to concede goals at a rate that only Livingston are worse than them. So 12 goals so far in the 6 games. They are get-at-able, if that's a word, and you will see, I think, some joy for Rangers attacking players if they can start to carve out some chances. And they certainly should. But time will tell. It's going to be a massive game for Russell Martin, that's for sure. Every single game is a massive game for him at the moment because of the start. But you always feel that domestically, as I kind of said earlier, as I alluded to with the European games, I think domestically, these games carry double weight at the moment. And it'll be interesting to see how he performs. I certainly wouldn't like to put my head on a chopping block with a prediction, because you just don't know what kind of a performance Falkirk are going to bring to the table. If they're right at it and at their best, we know Rangers don't have high levels, and I think they can get a result. So it depends on that, and that's as much of an indictment as anything else. The fact that Falkirk levels are now dictating what a result will be against a team like Rangers. It's we're in uncharted territory, as you said earlier on.
Well, that's all from us here at the Rangers Review in our first show in our brand new studio. Hopefully many more to come throughout the course of the season. Thanks very much for watching, and thanks for listening.